A List to Starboard by F. Hopkinson Smith. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This recording is by Mark Smith of Simpsonville, South Carolina. A List to Starboard by F. Hopkinson Smith, Part 1. A short, square chunk of a man walked into a shipping office on the east side, and inquired for the manager of the line. He had kindly blue eyes, a stub nose, and a mouth that shut to like a rat trap, and stayed shut. Under his chin hung a pair of half-moon whiskers which framed his weather-beaten face as a spiked collar frames a dog's.
"You don't want to send this vessel to sea again," blurted out the chunk. "She ought to go to the dry dock. Her boats haven't had a brush full of paint for a year. Her boilers are caked clear to her top flues, and her pumps won't take care of her bilge water. Charter something else and lay her up." The manager turned in his revolving chair and faced him. He was the opposite of the captain in weight, length, and thickness, a slim, well-groomed, puffy-cheeked man of 60, with a pair of uncertain, badly aimed eyes, and a voice like the purr of a cat.
"Oh, my dear Captain, you surely don't mean what you say. She is perfectly seaworthy and sound. Just look at her inspection." And he passed him the certificate.
"No, I don't want to see it. I know 'em by heart. It's a lie, whatever it says. Give an inspector $20 and he's stone blind."
The manager laughed softly. He had handled too many rebellious captains in his time. They all had a protest of some kind. It was either the crew, or the grub, or the coal, or the way she was stowed. Then he added softly, more as a joke than anything, "Not afraid, are you, Captain?" A crack started from the left-hand corner of the captain's mouth, crossed a fissure in his face, stopped within half an inch of his stub nose, and died out in a smile of derision.
"What I'm afraid of is neither here nor there. There's cattle aboard. That is, there will be by tomorrow night. And there's a lot of passengers booked, some of them women and children. It isn't honest to ship 'em, and you know it. As to her boilers, send for the chief engineer. He'll tell you. You call it taking risks. I call it murder."
"And so I understand you refuse to obey the orders of the board? And yet she's got to sail on the 16th if she sinks outside."
"When I refuse to obey the orders of the board, I'll tell the board, not you. And when I do tell 'em, I'll tell 'em something else, and that is, that this chartering of worn-out tramps, painting 'em up and putting 'em into the line, has got to stop, or there'll be trouble."
"But this will be her last trip, Captain. Then we'll overhaul her."
"I've heard that lie for a year. She'll run as long as they can insure her and her cargo. As for the women and children, I suppose they don't count."
And he turned on his heel and left the office. On the way out he met the chief engineer.
"Do the best you can, Mike," he said. "Orders are we sail on the 16th.
On the fourth day out this conversation took place in the smoking room between a group of passengers.
"Regular tub, this ship," growled the man who knew it all to the bum actor. "Screw out of the water every souse she makes. Lot of dirty sailors skating over the decks instead of keeping below where they belong. Chief engineer loafing in the captain's room every chance he gets. There he goes now. And it's the second time since breakfast. And the captain is no better. And just look at the accommodations. 3 stewards and a woman. What's that to look after 35 passengers? Half the time I have to wait an hour to get something to eat, such as it is. And my bunk wasn't made up yesterday until plumb night. That bunch in the steerage must be having a hard time." "We get all we pay for," essayed the travelling man. She ain't rigged for cabin passengers, and the captain don't want 'em. Didn't want to take me, except our folks had a lot of stuff aboard. Had enough passengers, he said. Well, he took the widow and her 2 kids," continued the man who knew it all, "and they were the last to get aboard. Half the time he's playin' nurse instead of lookin' after his ship. Had 'em all on the bridge yesterday." "He had to take 'em," protested the travelling man. "She was put under his charge by his owners, so one of the stewards told me." "Oh, had to, did he? Yes, I've been there before. No use talking. This line's got to be investigated, and I'm going to do the investigating as soon as I get ashore, and don't you forget it. What's your opinion?" The bum actor made no reply. He had been cold and hungry too many days and nights to find fault with anything. But for the generosity of a few friends he would still be tramping the streets, sleeping where he could. 3 meals a day, 4 if he wanted them, and a bed and a room all to himself instead of being one in a row of 10, was heaven to him. What the captain, or the engineer, or the crew, or anybody else did, was of no moment, so he got back alive. As to the widow's children, he had tried to pick up an acquaintance with them himself, especially the boy, but she had taken them away when she saw how shabby were his clothes. The Texas cattle agent now spoke up. He was a tall, raw-boned man with a red chin-whisker and red, weather-scorched face, whose clothing looked as if it had been pulled out of shape in the effort to accommodate itself to the spread of his shoulders and round of his thighs. His trousers were tucked in his boots, the straps hanging loose. He generally sat by himself in one corner of the cramped smoking-room, and seldom took part in the conversation. The bum actor and he had exchanged confidences the night before, and the Texan therefore felt justified in answering in his friend's stead. "You're way off, friend," he said to the man who knew it all. "There ain't nothing the matter with the line, nor the ship, nor the captain. This is my 6th trip aboard of her, and I know. They had a strike among the stevedores the day we sailed, and then, too, we've got a scrub lot of stokers below, and the captain's got to handle 'em just so. That kind gets ugly when anything happens. I had 60 head of cattle aboard here on my last trip over, and some of 'em got loose in a storm, and there was hell to pay with the crew till things got straightened out. I ain't much on shooting irons, but they come in handy that time. I helped, and I know. Got a couple in my cabin now. Needn't tell me nothing 'bout the captain. He's all there when he's wanted, and it don't take him more'n a minute, either, to get busy." The door of the smoking-room opened, and the object of his eulogy strolled in. He was evidently just off the bridge, for the thrash of the spray still glistened on his oilskins and on his grey, half-moon whiskers. That his word was law aboard ship, and that he enforced it in the fewest words possible, was evident in every line of his face and every tone of his voice. If he deserved an overhauling, it certainly would not come from any one on board, least of all from Carhart, the man who knew it all. Loosening the thong that bound his sou'wester to his chin, he slapped it twice across the chair back, the water flying in every direction, and then faced the room. "Mr. Bonner." "Yes, sir," answered the big-shouldered Texan, rising to his feet. "I'd like to see you for a minute." And without another word the two men left the room and made their way in silence down the wet deck to where the chief engineer stood. "Mike, this is Mr. Bonner. You remember him, don't you? You can rely on his carrying out any orders you give him. If you need another man, let him pick him out." And he continued on to his cabin. Once there, the captain closed the door behind him, shutting out the pound and swash of the sea, took from a rack over his bunk a roll of charts, spread one on a table, and with his head in his hands studied it carefully. The door opened and the chief engineer again stood beside him. The captain raised his head. "Will Bonner serve?" he asked. "Yes, glad to, and he thinks he's got another man. He's what he calls out